Right, hello. So greetings, it's Thomas Daffern here again. It's my Sunday, dedicated to prayer, fasting, saving the world, planetary analysis. And I like to share that with my colleagues here and friends. So, yes, there's so much been happening in the world. It's hard to keep up, of course, but, today is a special day. It's coming up to the solstice. It's the 14th of June. So next Sunday it'll be the solstice day. I won't be doing a normal kind of film because I'm involved in coordinating this Summer Solstice event, which will be live streamed like a Stonehenge Peace Festival. It's the first time we've done this because normally one can go to the stones and thousands of people go. I've been many times for the solstice event and staying up all night, but we're going to be doing this online and people can, join the live feed. There'll be several groups doing this. English Heritage are also doing a kind of continual view from the stones themselves, although they're empty. And it's a symbolic time, the midsummer solstice. Should be a time of happiness, flourishing, thriving, maximum joy, celebration. Of course, it's a bit grimmer this year because we're all on lockdown. The planet is going through very dark times. There's a lot of polarization, a lot of energy on the planet, on the internet, and so on. That everything is like extreme. Well, okay, that's. I think that's unfortunate. I think it's also, it's part of the human condition. The human mind thinks in these polarities. The true self doesn't. The true self thinks from a place of unity. And, we're struggling to get out of this dualistic, bipolar world. Literally schizophrenic, actually. And we've had centuries of it. We've had left versus right, communist versus capitalist, black versus white, etc., etc. How can we get unity? Where can we get to peace? Well, that's what we're facing as a planet. To me, solstice represents a time where the forces who want unity, who want love, who want peace, can come together and affirm each other. So that's what I'll be doing on this solstice, and I invite you to join me. I've invited some keynote lecturers to give talks, a very interesting cast of people. We'll see who among them show up. But some really brilliant minds. I hope that at least some of them respond and come online and do their talk about the solstice. I'm not going to spoil, the excitement, but I can assure you already there's some really interesting people who have said, yes, I'm going to talk. Go on then, I have to say. So I want to share a couple who've agreed to talk because they're very important thinkers, actually. One is Professor David Adams, who is, for many years, he was in charge of UNESCO's Culture of Peace program. And he was, I believe, originally a scientist looking at aggression in human nature and what is it in the human mind that makes for aggression. And he organised things like the Seville Declaration on Non-Violence and Aggression. And science really has taken the view that aggression is not endemic in human nature. We don't have to be violent and hate-filled. That polarisation that leads to extreme hate, it's artificial, actually. It's incubated within certain sociological climates. And anyway, David ran this Cultural Peace program for many years in UNESCO headquarters and all around the world. Federico Mayor was the Secretary General of UNESCO at the time. I met Mayor. He was a great man. He lectured at the Institute of Education when I was working there at the University of London. And David Adams, anyway, there was then an adoption by the UN General Assembly, a huge political 10-year process it took to get it there, which declared for the culture of peace as a human right. Peace has been recognised as a human right for humanity in several UN declarations. Yeah, but so how do we build it? You know, how do we get there? That's where culture comes in. We can't just sort of jump to there from a kind of hate-filled, polarized world where Party X hates Party B, Party C hates Party D, you know. We can only do it by building a culture of peace, and that may take, I mean, I suppose back in the 80s, we thought it would take, you know, not that long, 10, 20 years. We thought we could get there by the millennium. Well, here we are in 2020 and we haven't got there, you know. It's taken longer than we thought. And it might be an intergenerational thing. Maybe this takes a very long time, but, oh gosh, you know, the Bodhisattva path says, well, you keep coming back, you know, to complete this task. Maybe it takes more than one lifetime. So be it, you know. The true Dharma warriors of the planet are not going away. We're going to keep going with this culture of peace. David is one of them. And he now lives in France, right? Like many intellectuals. So he has agreed to speak. And he is like one of the planet's leading thinkers on what peace is and how we can get there. So that's a great honour that he's speaking. I want to share another colleague who's agreed to speak. And this is an amazing guy who's in Israel, who's an amazing chap. He was a judge for many years, and hey, Israel needs justice, right? We need judges there, not least to put Netanyahu in prison. I mean, for being, you know, for doing what he's been doing, which is flouting the law. So Shlomo Soham is a judge professionally for many years, and his last job was working for the Knesset, which is the Parliament of Israel, as the ombudsman for future generations. This is a hugely interesting thing to have done. He did it, I think, for 7 years. And it was part of a movement around the world, there's one in Sweden and elsewhere, to look at legislation from a much bigger perspective and say, look, in 7 generations from now, will we be thanked for passing this law or not? You know, I think with hindsight that the emancipation of the slaves by Lincoln, that was legislation that was approved by 7 generations hence. You know, that kind of, yes, but there's lots of other legislation we can think of that isn't, that was counter to human destiny. So the judge had this impossible job, really, to look at every single law that the Knesset passed over that 7-year period and say, did this pass the test? Was this going to stand the look at it from 7 generations hence law? I mean, you know, I've not talked in detail to him about what kind of criteria he set up, what his remit was, because this was an official post within the Knesset, which was very far-seeing. I mean, I you know, take my hats off to any country or parliament that will put that kind of a post in place. You know, one can talk about, well, what sanctions did he actually have? He had the power to send legislation back to the Knesset and say, this is not good, this is going to be bad news for the future. Anyway, he's gone on, since he retired, to think deeply about what he calls future intelligence. So we have to think prophetically. We have to think, are my actions, like the Iroquois Indians say, you know, from 7 generations hence, will my descendants thank me for doing what I'm doing now? If each of us can say that, then we're doing the right thing, we're on the right path. If we don't even ask that question or haven't got even a clue what it means, then I think we're probably on the wrong path, you know. I think there should be an ombudsman for the future generations in every parliament, you know, and there is a move to that end. As I say, there are some parliaments which have them. So, and he now works training up a young generation of thinkers and leaders all around the world, not just in Israel, to take that bigger picture, to think about the future generations. He will be talking about peace, what peace looks like from the Middle East perspective, but globally. How we can, you know, how can we jump forward in our minds 7 generations and then look back? What action should we be taking now that will help create peace on the planet? And he's a member of the World Intellectual Forum team, which I'm coordinating in Europe. He's on the team in Israel. He's a genius, you know. So it's a great, amazing honour that he's agreed to speak during our solstice. Peace Festival, and he himself is born on the 21st of June. So if that isn't symbolic, I don't know what is. And there are others of that ilk that have already agreed to speak, and there are others coming in every day. So I think it's going to be an interesting and historic event. And you're welcome to, it will be live streamed on Facebook and or YouTube, so you can watch in. Okay, so what else have I been up to? Well, this week, some of you know, I've just published my 4th volume of my little book of peace declarations, which now has become a somewhat ironic title because it's now a very big book of peace declarations. But I just can't stop. Once I get a good idea, I just go with it. It's my Tyrian nature, right? And I kept finding incredible things to add. This has been an odyssey for me because although I've been an expert in peace studies for a while, I run an institute of peace studies and I've studied the thing, in depth. There's loads of new stuff I found out here because I've never before thought of this idea of putting all the peace declarations of history into 4 volumes. And nobody else has had this idea. I don't know why. We've all been asleep, I think. Us peace studies people have been asleep on the job. Somebody should have done this. Anyway, I've done it now. And it's there as a resource for everyone that cares about peace, not just academic experts, but every student that, maybe there isn't a peace studies elective in your university, you're doing something like anthropology or economics, but you're passionately interested in peace. Well, now you can read your texts. These volumes have assembled the collective texts of mankind for peace. And I've only got time to highlight a few here in this brief talk. This volume, volume 4, starts in 776 BC, right? Now why? What happened in 776 BC? Well, it was the first Olympic Games, and there was a declaration of truce. Officially, it was an official thing among all the Greek city-states, which were quite warlike, People of Sparta didn't really get on with the people of Athens very well. And but during the Olympic Games, they all agreed to put the weapons down, and no fighting was allowed. And it was known as the Olympic truce. So that is one of the first peace declarations known in history. And when the Olympic Games were revived in 1898 in Athens by some campaigners and so on, they said, we want the Olympic truce to be observed now. So they asked that each Olympic Games, when it comes around every 4 years, that all the wars should stop on the planet. Now that hasn't happened, unfortunately, of course. Surprise, surprise, the war machine likes to carry on ticking over. But there are people that have been campaigning for that Olympic truce to be revived, because until we get that, we haven't actually revived the Olympic Games. We've revived, people assembling and throwing javelins and jumping over, high jumps and etc. But that's not what the real spirit of the Olympic Games was. The Olympic Games was like, hey, you're coming to the sanctuary of Zeus. This is the supreme god of gods and his amazing consort Hera. Out of honour to them, you're going to stop your stupid petty wars for this time. And you're going to do other things like show what it is to be human, excel in something. I strongly believe that we should revive the Olympic truce, and so does the UN. And I've given here in the book a text. The UN passed a resolution a few years ago saying we want to revive the Olympic truce and urging all member countries, not to go to war during the Olympic Games. So I think it's a great idea. Let's do it. And I'd even go further and I'd say let's then extend that Olympic truce to all year round. Why not? Let's have more games and less wars. I mean, if country X wants to fight country Y, we'll send in, let's have a couple of wrestling teams go for it. And they can wrestle, and the winner wins. I mean, they get a prize and everyone goes home. I mean, most scholars of warfare realise that warfare began as a sort of display in the old days of humanity, there were not many people around, so killing people was actually very bad news for the population. You need your people, you need your young men to be the husbands and partners of the women. So what you did, like in Borneo, what they do is they come out with their spears, they dress with their headdresses, and they shout a lot and they dance. And they have they poke spears towards each other, but they're careful not to actually hit each other. It's a display thing. And occasionally somebody might get seriously wounded, or very occasionally somebody might die. Well, then the fighting stops, the game's over. It's more like battle reenactments. Now that's what warfare should be like. It's a ritual theatre for, paradoxical kind of way, celebrating eros and celebrating life. And it's a dance to attract the female or the male. I mean, because some women like to do the warrior thing, but not so often. So the Olympic Games, if we could get more games and less warfare, I'd be a happy priest of ISIS. And also, I should say that the Olympic Games are not the only games in ancient Greece. There was also, parallel to them, something called the Delphic Games. They took part at other intervals of time, every 4 years, when it wasn't the Olympic Games time. And they took place at Delphi, which is one of the most holy sites in the world to a philosopher. I've been there to die for, amazing, go to Delphi. Sacred place of Apollo and Gaia. And in the Delphic Games, there was no physical sport. It was culture. It was poetry contests. It was like a Druid Eisteddfod, like we have sometimes at Stonehenge, or the Welsh do in their annual Eisteddfod festivals. They have poetry contests, bards, etc. That's what they did in the Delphic Games. And great poets were judged, and also they had debating, they had intellectual contests, they had philosophical disputes about, is there one god or three? I mean, you could see the potential to revive the Delphic Games and get some of these religions arguing about how many gods there are and whether their theory is better. And that would be a lot better than having, bomb explosions and warfare and trillions spent on warfare and warfare planning. We'll spend a few 100,000 a year on a Delphic Games, and I'd be very happy to organise the philosophical contests, and colleagues of mine at Struga could organise the poetry contests and so on. There was dancing contests as well, different dance styles. I think the Georgians would win. I've been watching Georgian dance. They're amazing, the Georgians are from the Caucasus region. They're a nation given over to dance, it seems to me. But hey, so are other cultures, and other cultures would say, no, our dance style is best. So, and there could be fashion contests. There could be, beauty pageants, and fashion designers, Vivienne Westwood, etc., could deck out their models and have fashion contests for beauty. Let's have the most beautiful Muse of the Year award at the Delphic Games. And it would be beauty and brains. It was who's done the most for world peace, as well as, who's got the greatest style. Anyway, that would be the Delphic Games. So there is a group campaigning for that. These are practical things. So I put the Olympic truce thing in. The other thing I put in, which I was just happy to find and put in, is a treaty, or an oath actually, connected with Alexander the Great, who I've always been interested in as a character, ever since studying ancient history for part of my A-level studies, and philosophy and Aristotle, who was his teacher. I'm a great fan of a lot of Aristotle's work. I mean, I think he was a polymathic genius. I mean, Aristotle is one of the great philosophers of history, I think, and the thought that he taught this young chap, who then went off and conquered half the world, I mean, it's one of the most extraordinary kind of relationships and sequences of events in history, I think. Now, Alexander, whatever you think of him, he was probably the greatest warrior that's ever lived, probably did the most difficult feats if you read his life story, they're impossible to do type of feats, scaling mountains to capture cities and all that. But in a sense, his story is so, in a sense, tragic because it proves the fallibility of warfare. I mean, the greatest warrior who ever lived. Now, what did he do? Just towards the end of his life, he issued this oath at a place called Opis in 324 BC, and this has come down to us historically. It's come down through various writers, fragments, Aristophanes, Strabo, Plutarch, and so on. And so we know what the text was. And I'm going to read it because this is hardly ever shared. Nobody knows about Alexander the Great's last vision, okay? It is interesting, I think you'll see. Now that the wars are coming to an end, and this is after he's gone back to Babylon, he's conquered the whole thing from Egypt, Libya, Phoenicia, Judea. He didn't even bother to go to Jerusalem. The Israeli elders came out and said, please come and visit our city. He didn't bother to go, but he sort of freed them from whatever problems they had. And he then obviously went on and conquered Persia and Central Asia, married a Central Asian woman, and then all the way to northern India, where finally his army revolted and said, we want to go home, that's enough. Because he wanted to keep going. He was going on to Burma, etc. I mean, ridiculous. So no, he had to go home, but they got to Babylon, which he'd made his kind of international capital, and that's where this oath was taken. And around that time, just before he died, unfortunately. Now that the wars are coming to an end, I wish you all to prosper in peace. From now on, may all mortals live as one people, in fellowship for the good of all. See the whole world as your homeland, with laws common to all, where the best will govern, regardless of their race. Unlike the narrow-minded, I make no distinction between Greeks and barbarians. I'm not interested in the origin of the citizens or the race into which they were born. I have only one criterion by which to distinguish them: their virtue. For me, any good foreigner is a Greek, and any bad Greek is worse than a barbarian. If disputes ever arise among you, do not resort to weapons, but solve them peacefully. If needed, I will arbitrate between you. See God not as an autocratic despot, but as the common father of all, so that your conduct will be like the life of siblings of the same family. I, on my part, see you all as equal, whether you're white or dark-skinned. And I wish you all to be not only subjects of the Commonwealth, but members of it, partners of it. To the best of my ability, I will strive to do what I have promised. Let us hold on to the oath we have taken tonight with our libations as a contract of love. And then a loving cup was passed around and they all drank, and it was like, a toast and a seal. Well, I find that text absolutely, unbelievable, really. But it's true. I first read about it in Mircea Eliade's amazing work on the history of religions. I mean, he was a great Romanian professor of religious history at Chicago University who inspired my early studies in comparative religion. And it was there. I first read about it. Eliade found it. He knew this text. And I thought, wow, that's incredible. Why has nobody ever talked about this, So that's why I put it in the book. I think this is amazing. And it also gives the lie to all the racist stuff that's going down on the planet as to whether this or that nation or race is the best. come on, folks, we've got to grow up, we have one common father, as Alexander said, one source, and we are part of one planetary commonwealth, a brotherhood of love, a sisterhood of love. And Alexander founded Alexandria, which then became, for me, one of the great intellectual powerhouses of history, a philosophical centre for Gnosticism, Neoplatonism, and the museum. That's why I have here the Museum of the Muses. It's an homage to Alexandria. And his vision of peace, really. One thing that's really interesting is they've never yet found the body of Alexander the Great. He was buried in Alexandria, everyone thinks, but never found the tomb. I don't think we'll ever find the tomb until we make world peace. I predict that once we do get world peace properly and the wars stop, then we'll find the tomb, because he'll be saying, okay, you deserve it now. We should behave we should remember this oath and behave according to its mission. Those people on the planet that are thinking we can get there through warriorship, like Hitler, who was a terrible general, by the way. I've been reading a biography, the great biography, John Toland, I think, of Hitler, and he just was totally useless. I mean, Stalin and co, and all these people that think war is the answer, they're wrong, they're idiots. I mean, even Churchill, again, warlords, they're all equally stupid in my opinion. And now we have all the people that are paying for wars on the planet still. There's trillions of, it's a scam, it's a billion-dollar business, trillion-dollar business. And it's got to be stopped. And that's what my mission is with this book of peace declarations, Wake up, humanity. Stop giving money. Unfund the police, unfund the military, as they're saying in the demonstrations for peace in America, quite rightly. And also in Britain, people have been campaigning about this. Enough is enough, people. So that's another great declaration. And the other one I've got in here that I just want to flag up is what I call the Pythagorean Oath. Now, this is something that we don't know what the text was in ancient times. We know there was a Pythagorean Oath. To become a philosopher in the ancient world, and you studied with Pythagoras in Crotona, the first academy in the Western world, and you had to swear an oath not to misuse your knowledge, not to misuse your knowledge for evil. Because Pythagoras was a great teacher, and you learned science, you learned the symmetry behind existence, you learned the complexity of existence. And that is power. Knowledge is power, as Francis Bacon said. So it was important to require students to take an oath of non-harm before they were initiated and graduated, so to speak, because graduation and initiation are fundamentally very similar types of ceremonies in academia. You see, modern day academia, the university system, descends from the Pythagorean school through Plato and through the academy. Was there an oath of graduation in Plato's time? Very probably, almost certainly. What was it like? Needs reconstructing. So what I'm calling for here in this book, and I'm giving, is the text of attempts to create a kind of ethical code for science and an ethical code for scholars who graduate with a higher degree, equivalent to the Hippocratic Oath, which was in a former document, former volume. So the Hippocratic Oath, you swear as a doctor, I will not harm patients, I will not kill patients. You know, that dreadful man Shipman who killed millions of his patients, he broke his Hippocratic Oath. I think, he disgraceful. The Nazi doctors that killed people with their euthanasia program and did experiments in Auschwitz, they broke their Hippocratic Oath. And it has consequences. If you break the Hippocratic Oath, you're kicked out of the medical profession. Trouble is, of course, if you're working for Nazi doctors who've taken over the state and they've changed the law, well, you know, you only get found out at the Nuremberg trials, where there was a trial for Nazi doctors. But in our world, scientists can do what they want, it seems. They can create instruments of mass death. They can invent new forms of mass killing. My friend Steve Wright, who recently died, a peace researcher, he was onto them. He was tracing these new weapons they're inventing all the time on vast salaries, you know. And now they're going into bioweapons. And whether or not the coronavirus thing that we're all suffering from was a leak from a bioweapons lab, you know, hey, will we ever know? There is certainly that kind of research going on, which is why I say these labs should be shut down. And the scientists who are doing that kind of research, in the name of their nation state and their geopolitical interests, they should all be forced to take a Pythagorean Oath of non-harm. And so I've put together here in the book the Ethical Code for Scientists of 2007 by Sir David King, who was then the Chief Government Advisor. And he, by the way, has got together a parallel group looking at the COVID-19. He's a very good man, is Sir David King. And he put together this code of ethics for scientists. The Student Pugwash Group in America created one in 1997, where you swear when you graduate to, you know, I will not use my education for any purpose intended to harm human beings or the environment. Sir Joseph Rotblat, who I met, who won the Nobel Prize, liked this one. And then there's other declarations I've given. Sorry, coughing time here. And there's a graduation pledge, which has come from a graduation pledge alliance. And this has been going since 1987. And it was supported by the then president of Stanford University, Donald Kennedy, who in 1988 in his commencement address, he addressed 30,000 people saying, please sign this when you're graduated. This is for all graduates, not just for doctorates. That man, Donald Kennedy, who was no relation of President Kennedy, just coincidence, but obviously from an Irish descent, sadly he died a couple of months ago of COVID-19. He was an old man, and it's carrying off the elderly, but he was a really good man, I think, who supported this graduation pledge, and it's still going strong. Students all over the world are encouraged to, you know, to sign this when they graduate. You can do it, and many scholars and scientists who are interested in ethics have backed this. And then there's what's called the Socratic teacher's oath by a German expert, a professor of education in Germany. I've given the text of that, about, you know, your duties as a teacher, not to lie, not to deceive, not to abuse, you know, all that stuff. And then there's the text I've proposed, which is the Pythagorean Oath, the reconstruction of it. And I've given it here, which is an adaptation of the Hippocratic Oath. So I've taken the Hippocratic Oath, and I've, you know, added bits and changed the wording slightly. So anyway, you can look at it in the book, and I advise that anyone receiving a higher doctorate, so a Doctor of Science or engineering or medicine or law or literature or whatever,